Okay, here is today's let me say a couple of things. I don't know if you've noticed the announcements, but there are talks that you can go to earn extra credit points. There's still 2 remaining, one next Monday and the other one the Monday after that. Okay, so you're invited to take advantage of that. And one change I made is that instead of lumping the extra credit points or adding them to a test, I'm gonna just create a category of extra credit points and just pile them up there, because it makes it easier to keep track of and make sure that we agree about how many points you've earned. Does everybody understand that they're all in one place? So starting from the SEIs, all the extra credit that you've earned has been dumped into this extra credit category. And where I dump the points doesn't change your grade in any way. Does everybody understand that? Doesn't matter where I actually place them. Okay, so feel free to take that opportunity. Chapter 5 test, I think I have all my stragglers in, which means I will post the answers to Chapter 5 soon enough, okay? And the way the rest of the semester goes down is this. Remember, there is no quiz for Chapter 6, and so the test will be released today is Thursday, Tuesday. It'll be due this Sunday of the Thanksgiving break. I will also post the final on that Tuesday if I get it together, and that will be due during finals, and I'll specify the time. Does everybody understand that? Okay. Okay, there's one item that I didn't speak about last time in Chapter 6, and that was analogy, so let me take care of that now. Okay. The standard form of an analogy, or the logical form of an analogy, is something like this. A has attributes W, X, Y, and Z. B has attributes W, X, and Y. Therefore, B probably has Z as well, okay? Now, no one offers an analogy like that. They'll say C or A is similar to B in all of these ways. So they don't use this language, but that's the basic idea. Does everybody understand that? Okay, and so what could happen is this. You could encounter an analogy, and you need to decide whether or not it's strong or weak. And if it's weak, it's in some sense fallacious, and we throw the result out, not meaning we claim it's false, we just say it's unsupported. Does everybody understand that? Okay. So I want to go over some analogies, and then we can talk about different ways in which analogies can be weak, okay? And let me just point out the first thing. So the first thing that you can do is fact check. I mean, they're claiming A has attributes W, X, Y, and Z, and B has attributes W, X, and Y. Is that true? If it's not true, then the analogy becomes weaker and weaker. Does everybody understand that? So number one is fact check, okay? But let's talk about other ways in which we can think about whether an analogy is strong or weak, okay? So consider the following analogy. I'm on page 147 of the text. Barn owls are often found living in barns. Barn owls are capable of flight. Barn owls are nocturnal hunters. Barn owls lay eggs. Big brown bats are known to roost in barns. Big brown bats are capable of flight. Big brown bats are nocturnal hunters. Therefore, big brown bats probably lay eggs too. Okay. All of the claimed similarities between the owls and bats are indeed true. What is more, barn owls do lay eggs. In this case, there are two routes to take determining whether the analogy is strong or weak, okay? So all the facts check out. So one thing that you can do is you can say, but you know what? B is like C, and C doesn't have Z. So if you can say, hey, look, this thing is like this other thing, and it doesn't have Z, well then you weaken the analogy, right? And when you say is like, what you're saying, you know, is something like this has W, X, and Y. So it's similar to this other thing, but that other thing doesn't have this Z characteristic. Does everybody understand that? For example, I'm reading passage 159. The masked shrew is a mammal. The masked shrew is primarily nocturnal. The masked shrew is primarily an insectivore. The masked shrew does not lay eggs. Big brown bats are mammals. Big brown bats are nocturnal hunters. Big brown bats are insectivores. Therefore, big brown bats probably do not lay eggs. So we're saying, they said B is like A, but what we're saying is, hey, wait a minute, but B is also like C, and C doesn't have Z, so it makes you think that B has Z. Does everybody understand that? Okay, and that's exactly what's happening in passage 159, okay? There is another thing that we can do, though, and that is this. If we can point out an important difference between A and B, that can destroy the analogy in and of itself. So, can you think of a difference that's relevant to whether or not we might suppose that B has Z? A difference between barn owls and big brown bats. What's a significant difference that goes against bats laying eggs?
One of them can fly.
What?
One of them can fly.
Both of them can fly, bats and owls. Owls are what? Birds. What do birds do?
They have feathers.
Yes, they have feathers, but they normally lay eggs. Do mammals normally lay eggs? No. So one thing you can do is simply say, look, I don't trust your analogy. Why? Because birds are, barn owls are birds, and birds typically lay eggs, but bats are mammals, and bats typically don't lay eggs, right? So pointing out that difference between the two is enough to destroy the analogy, okay? Now, there is one last point about analogies that can make an analogy weak, and that is this. A and B might have all sorts of similarities, W, X, and Y, okay? But for the similarities to count, they have to be related to Z being true, okay? If they are irrelevant to whether or not Z is true, well then the analogy is making all these true claims, but they have nothing to do with whether or not Z is likely to be true. Now that was all very abstract, so let me give you a concrete example, and I'm looking at page 148. I'm reading passage 160, which says, Steve's truck has a CD player and GPS. Steve's truck has leather seats. Steve's truck has a gun rack. Steve's truck has chrome wheels. Steve's truck gets good gas mileage for a truck. JR's truck also has a CD player and GPS. JR's truck has leather seats, gun rack, and chrome wheels too. So JR's truck might get good gas mileage or must get good gas mileage for a truck. What say you? Well, this is what you should say. What the hell does having a CD player, GPS, chrome wheels, or leather seats have to do with what? gas mileage, right? Those are irrelevant to whether or not you're gonna get gas mileage. So they might have all those things in common, but that in no way means that they would in any way have similar gas mileage. If you wanted to say, well, his truck gets good gas mileage and his truck is similar, what kinds of things would you point to that would be relevant to gas mileage?
How many miles they have on it?
Yeah, okay, that's one. Because older trucks generally don't get as good gas mileage, or trucks with lots of mileage on them, usually don't get as good gas mileage as a newer version. But what really is gonna be important is the kind of engine they have, and the size of engine they have, and whether or not they have automatic or manual transmission, and whether or not it's four-wheel drive, all-wheel drive, or two-wheel drive. Does everybody understand? All of those things are relevant to what kind of gas mileage you're getting. So those are the kinds of things that ought to be compared, right? They're similar in these ways. Then the argument becomes strong. The items that we have listed aren't relevant to gas mileage. Does everybody understand that? Okay. All right, so that covers the content of chapter 6. So what I want to do now is I want to turn to the homework associated with chapter 6, and let's go over it and sharpen our skills, okay? And you should notice that right before chapter 6, there's a summary of all of the arguments, or all the fallacies, okay? So you might want to have that handy as you're going through the homework, okay? Or a test, okay? There are 29 fallacies, as it were, but on the test, I'm going to give you 4 options. Does everybody understand that? So it's going to be multiple choice or multiple guess, okay? So among the options,